they are not eligible for PTO, right? But there have been times when PTO has been added to somebody, maybe they've only been here for 3 weeks and they give them a week of PTO. It's like, oh, I forgot, right? This keeps us from forgetting.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. So this is the only way to go through this process is not going on the timesheet, but going through the request PTO. Okay. So again,
this is going to give you just all kinds of oddball. Going to give you all kinds of oddball figures
like
at
what?
So if someone clocks out early, so they got 7.68 of actual worked hours.
Yeah.
And they have to use PTO before unpaid time, then
No,
that is
that's not what that means.
let me finish.
Okay.
Is at the end of the week when I go to approve payroll.
Right.
All right. I go down my list. If I've entered my PTO, if I've entered all time correctly, and it's a non-overtime week for that person, every person should be 80 hours. All right. So now I'm going through approvals and I'm checking them because doing 120 payroll records, check by check by check, looking at each one individually is going to take forever. I look and I make sure, okay, are we all in correctly? Does everyone have the 80 they deserve? If something's wonky, I know to look at it. Well, now everything's going to be, well, hopefully not, but I mean, there will be wonky situations where you're like, now I got to check those out and stuff like that. Whereas before, if that person left early and they had accrued PTO, I could put in that point, whatever it was, less than an hour, and
right, but that's actually not the way the policy is set up, right? Is for us to fill in their hours to make it a full 80. So if they really didn't work 80 hours, we don't need to pay them 80 hours, right?
But it's a contradicting policy though.
No. So unpaid time would be, hourly Alec decides, or he's got to go to a doctor's appointment, takes a half a day, but he doesn't want to use his PTO. That is
But he has to use it, yeah.
Right. But if he clocks in every day, he works 5 days a week, and he does his full time, but for whatever reason, like maybe you guys
shut a line down early.
Shut a line down.
Yeah.
That he's not required to use his PTO.
But if he wants to.
If he wants to, but that's my point. Is that it's not in every case. So when we say paid before unpaid, that's not we shut the line down, so you guys all have to take PTO. That's not what that means.
Right, but
or somebody only
correct.
Works 39
I agree with that. And so what we would do in that case in the past, and I understand it's probably changing, but in the past what we would do is we would fill in that remaining time with either, at that employee's choice, that person's choice, with either paid or unpaid to equal that 8 hours. So that at the end of the 2 weeks, at the end of the pay period, everyone should be at 80 or 88.
And that's totally fine.
Okay.
And so if you still want to do that, that's okay. However, it has to be in 1 hour increments because that is in our policy. So our policy specifically states PTO is taken in 1 hour increments, not in fractions of hours. So this is helping us uphold that policy. All right, so during orientation when we talk about PTO, it's in 1 hour increments. So if somebody wants 0.17 to make it an even 40, they're gonna have to take a full hour.
So it's still off no matter what.
Yeah, so it's not gonna be a perfect, beautiful 80 hours, right? But that is our policy, right? So that is how, that's going through this process is going to help make everything in alignment with our policies. So our practices, Kronos rules, and our policies are all the same. Any other
Just
questions?
means you get to spend more time at your desk, John, instead of on the floor.
Okay, any other questions on that? Okay. So we've talked about schedules, we talked about time off codes. What we didn't talk about is the reason code, right? So we did look at, Miss Trinity had this day where she had a leave of absence and she took PTO. Then she calls off the next day, right? So before we went in and put the PTO, she had a reason code here that showed absent, right? So this was not planned, this was not scheduled, this wasn't pre-approved, but she wants to take her PTO for that day. So how do you still give her a point? So that is where on this particular one, you would go over and you would add a line. And under PTO, you're gonna choose reason, right? Because that's what's the reason? I'm gonna tell you what the reason why I'm adding this line. And you have to put something in here, so we just put 1, you could put 1, 2, 3, whatever number. You just have to put a value there. And you're gonna put the reason. So she was unexcused absence, a full point, and you're gonna save, and it's gonna say unapproved, whatever your comment is, the reason that you're adding that point for her, that exception. Okay?
So it's gonna add another hour to that timesheet?
No, it's not, that's not payable, right?
No, I know, but I'm just saying, at the bottom on the total, when you go to approve, it's gonna add another hour.
Yes, it will. Yeah. But the same thing here, right? So you've got got 16 hours here for FMLA, right? If it's paid before unpaid, so, and that's currently the case that it is now. So any time that you have any leave of absence entered, it's always, and you're adding PTO, you're always gonna have that double time, or close to that. Question? Okay. Any other questions on that? So I know that's a little bit different. You know, again, we've taken away the unpaid time. We're putting in the missed code punch. Our reason codes are here. So we have missed punch, no call, no show. We added the point value here, so that when you're entering that reason, you know, oh yeah, this is a whole day, they get a whole point. If you have an unexcused early, somebody comes more than 4 hours late, or they leave more than 4 hours early and it's unexcused, it is a full point, so that is your reason for that. Okay? Yes.
Should there be a way for us to see, to make sure they're at 80 hours, disregarding all the double time and all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So you can look at these couples.
So of course, this is our test person, so it's, you know, we're putting in data to make it, you know, kind of help you see the different exceptions or the code. So she obviously doesn't work very much to get her full work, right? And you see we removed her overtime as well on Saturday.
So just gonna look at her regular.
Regular,
Yeah.
yeah.
Got it.
So she only has 20 hours of regular work. Okay, any questions? All right, so we talked about leave of absence codes. Again, when it comes to entering that, I know you guys haven't been doing personal or military. The code that you used to use was unpaid FMLA, but we're using all the same. One of the things that we'll be adding this year is the leave of absence module, which will help this process. But for the time being, we're getting you used to being able to look at that and enter that information, okay?
And you shouldn't use those unless it's been approved.
Yes.
That's what we fill the paperwork out.
Yes.
Right.
Yep, and so there is gonna be, and we'll talk about this, in the self-service, that the, people themselves will initiate that leave, because there are, mandated time frames when somebody initiates the request, how long they have to get the paperwork in, how long we have to answer that information. So, by going through a workflow, it helps to force those, help us to stay compliant within those guidelines.
Oh, you, like, someone just, I'm taking a leave of absence tomorrow, and then they have an they have an X amount of time to get the paperwork in.
Yeah, so it's, so they have, so the time they initiate the request, if they say, hey, I need to take a leave of absence, they have 2 weeks to get the paperwork back to us. Once we get it back, we have 5 days to respond. So those are legal guidelines, that's not just Crescent making those guidelines up, right?
Right.
So once it comes back, you know, Chris gets the information, he has 2 days to get it to me, I have 3 days to get a response back to you.
But then they haven't left yet, they're still.
Hopefully not,
Cause it may not be approved, so
Right.
they may not have a job, yeah.
right?
But
So-
that's, yeah, so same leave of absence policy.
Same leave of the policy itself hasn't changed, we're just adding some pieces in to help us manage it better. Yeah, good question. But you would still get that information from either Chris, or whoever your SPG is, or myself, to say, yes, it's been approved, don't count these absences against them, paid before unpaid, all of that good stuff will be you will be reminded in that email. Okay, any other questions? Okay. So we talked about time off codes, we talked about leave of absence, we talked about not modifying timesheets, we talked about PTO requesting it on behalf of your people, what you can do, entering your PTO. Okay, holiday hours, we did talk about that as well. That's based on company policy. I think you guys all know how holiday hours work, right? That you have to work your scheduled day prior to and after, so if you have a PTO out there, that doesn't count, right? The one exception that has occurred, I think, one time in the 3 years, is if somebody has an emergency. So on December 23rd, somebody has appendicitis, they're rushed to the ER, they're absent on the 23rd, right? So there are some cases where that person wouldn't get holiday pay on the 24th and 25th. However, in our policy, it says in those rare cases, that if they were able to bring that documentation in, that we would still pay their holiday pay, okay? The holiday pay is based on standard work hours, right? So standard holiday pay is 8 hours. per holiday, so we all are allowed 64 hours per year. And that is based on standard hours. So, and PTO is based on standard hours, which again is why our schedules are important.
You have some operations working 10-hour days.
Yes.
We do, but still, the holiday policy is 8 hours of pay, holiday pay for those. So, like, Mason City works crazy hours, they have their floating holiday. D1 has 10-hour days. When C1 had their second shift, that was 10 hours, it's still 8 hours of holiday pay, right? So our holiday schedule and our holiday policy says 8 hours, so that's 64 hours that people have available in terms of holiday pay, and they have 2,080 hours of regular time available. So every operation.
Just out of curiosity, when someone takes a PTO day at D1, do they get charged 10 or do they get charged 8 of their PTO hours?
It's for their standard work hours, which
Okay.
would be 10.
Oh, so they get charged 10 hours for a day there?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
so it's based on, again, schedules dictate all of that, so
Yeah.
those standard work hours, that's something that we realized at D1 when we were going through.
Yeah.
Is if their schedule's not set up correct and those standard hours aren't entered correct, then it's gonna pull over 8.
Gotcha.
You can do, obviously, bulk hours, right, to say I'm taking, however many hours for that day, but it is all pulled out of that standard work day.
But if they have accrued time and they wanna use a PTO day, they have to take 10 hours.
10 hours, that's their standard hours.
Gotcha.
That's a good question. What are other questions on that? Anything else? We talked about bereavement and jury duty. We talked about the time off exception codes. We talked about leave of absence. So let's talk about timesheet approvals. Okay, our favorite thing. So, because at the end of the day, what matters is our people get paid. So when we go into timesheet approval, you can go to manage timesheets, and you see timesheet approval history. So in the past, you had a couple choices. You had timesheets to approve or pending approval, and then you had approval history. If a timesheet was rejected for any reason, it wouldn't have shown up in any other place besides the timesheet approval history. So that is why that's the only option that you have right now. So if you go in, and I don't know, right, so we have no timesheets in here right now. You always, if something comes up like this, you're gonna wanna check, the timesheet dates to make sure you're in the right pay period, right? Okay, so we can just look at everybody, yeah,
And you can set up a report where we'll do previous timesheet approval, right?
okay. So like in this, so Ms. Valerie, hers was, rejected for whatever reason, it didn't go through the way that we wanted it to. So you can check here, and you can go into view timesheets, or you can approve, right? So if you had multiple people here and you wanted to look at all their timesheets individually, you can do that. You can also, if you've already looked at everybody, you know that it's correct, you can hit approve from here. Okay, so you can still do everybody's approval at the same time, right?
And the hours show on here.
Okay, so this process isn't really any different than before, it's just gonna look a little bit different.
And, after April, when Kronos makes everybody move to this, they'll show up in your bill as well, so you can do it either way. So if you do it this way, your bill will reduce as you approve them.
Okay.
And they'll populate through workflow, through the approval process then? Okay. So once John approves them, they then show up in Bill's bill?
Yeah.
Currently?
So I can do them all at one time, I don't have to go in each.
Yeah, correct.
Yes, you can do it, yeah, so that's, if we went through here, you could go each timesheet individually and approve, or you could check them all if you had 20 timesheets and you could approve them all that way. Again, because you guys are probably gonna be going in every day, like, great supervisors and managers, and making sure that their information is correct, right? Doing your hours reconciliation report, if they're off, you wanna see what timesheets those are off, where those are off, but you can do, approve everybody at once. Okay. Any questions on that? Yes.
That point exactly gets back to why that attendance board is so important. If, Tina, you talk to anybody from Kronos and feel like passing that along.
Yeah, because.
That's how I manage my time off every day with people.
The dot board is what they're.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can go in and I can tell you which 6 people are out right now and who's clocked in, and that way I can see, well, wait a second. Yeah, exactly, just like
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's possible in this view then?
No, this is,
Oh, that's the
Fine.
other one. Oh,
Fine.
sorry, yeah,
a report is where it says in and out, but not that visual.
okay. So if they ask for any feedback,
Yeah.
would really appreciate if you pass that one on.
Okay, any questions on that, on the timesheet approval process? So if you have, do any of you guys print timesheets out for your people right now?
Only if they request it.
Okay, so how, you're going to do that? What?
I'll be doing that.
You print them all out? Yeah.
And they have to say it's okay, so if there's any disagreements, it's out before I sign off on it.
Yeah, which is good, and I know there's some sites that do that, they print all the timesheets out for their people, they have to sign off, and then they even have that record of, yes, you said that this was okay, so those 16 hours of PTO that were missing, you should have caught, I should have caught, right, it all should have been done. Okay, so if you want to print a timesheet, right, so you can either go, you can go into the timesheet itself, and you can go to utilities, and you go down to print.
Same as last time.
Yeah, it's exactly the same, right? So it's not anything different.
Yeah.
You can do the print preview, you can check whichever boxes you wanna be able to see, you can do print preview, and make sure that it looks the way that you want it to. You can see she's got some PTO that needs to be approved here, it has all the same information, right? You can add stuff, remove stuff. You can change the options here if you wanted, you can go ahead and print it. If you're printing it out, like maybe you have all 20 of your people that you wanna print out together, you're gonna wanna make sure that you check this bottom one, print one timesheet per page. That way, they're not running together, especially maybe in Trinity's case, she only has 2 lines and then it puts somebody else's timesheet right below that, and you don't wanna hand for somebody else's timesheet or information, okay? Alright, you can close that. Alright, any questions? Alright, we already talked about overtime rules. Alright, so points, let's talk about points. So, what do you think is the most important thing when it comes to points being correct? Chris?
Schedules.
Oh, give that man a gold star. That's right, schedules. So schedules are the most important. So when we've had times when holiday pay doesn't get paid out, is because the schedule is incorrect. When we have points that are assessed incorrectly, it's because the schedules weren't correct, right? So if you want to look at points, you saw Tina went into the team and she's going to go to time and then points and balances, right? So what you're not gonna be able to do is, alright, so we're gonna pick, you can see the balances for all these people, so Tom is not gonna get a bad boy.
So to actually look at them, and there's in the start menu, which we didn't have this until the enhancements went out last week, but we've got in here points as well, so you can see this is your shortcut kind of things.
Yeah, no,
So
that's,
points in the history.
Right.
So.
This wasn't part of our training because this didn't exist.
But you can get to all those the same.
so the
way.
shortcuts is almost like my saved reports. I can
Um,
add whatever saved reports I want.
You can't add them, but there are, your safe reports are in here as well, right here. my
Okay,
save.
gotcha.
Yeah.
But I can't add that to the dashboard, to my landing page.
You can't.
Cannot. Yeah, so,
And yeah, the reason why we wanted to standardize everybody's view, so if somebody had an issue, they could call their SPG and they would be able to tell them exactly where to go to find different things.
yeah, which we can look at that. So if we wanted to go into our, points report. It's gonna look the same way, so it's gonna show you when they accrued their point, this was, how they got their point, of course, we added, a point was added there. When they accrued it, the reason for their point and the value for their point. Okay? And you can go into, obviously, click into the timesheet, and you guys know that anytime that you see something in blue, that is gonna take you someplace else, so you can click on that, look at the timesheet, look at the person, edit that information. You're not gonna be able to edit everything. Yeah, you're not gonna get the little edit tool. You don't have access. Okay. Do you guys have any questions on points? Like how to view points, what points mean? Any questions on points at all? I mean, I
Will
can
it
skip
still
over that.
require the SPG to run the points for them to
Yes.
go through?
So how, besides schedules being, having to be correct at the beginning, points are run every 2 weeks and they're run on a closed pay period for one reason. because once the period, if you run it during an open pay period, so maybe you have somebody that's at 7 points and they missed 3 times, and you're like, why, how many points do they have today? If your SPG ran those points today, Kronos cannot go back after the fact, and if you said, oh, those are really 2 PTO days, I'm gonna put them in, those are already counted as points against them, okay? So we run it on a closed pay period because you can't make any modifications to the timesheet at that point. They will run them on Wednesday after payroll is processed, and then points are done.
Is that a new thing?
No.
So that's
Shouldn't
always,
have been.
that's
Shouldn't
the
have
way it's always been, it just hasn't been, right? So that's again, part of the training, right, making sure that we're all in the line, we're all saying and doing the same thing. Alright, so if you see here, the updated today, this tells you the last time points were run. So in this, for all of these people, their points were run on February 17th, at the end of that pay period. So if these were run through Wednesday of an open pay period, we know that we're probably gonna have some issues with points, okay? So if you do have a question with somebody and you wanna know, well, when was the last time points were run, and you see this is November of 2019, you're like, hey, SPG, run the points, right? To see where people are at. And again, you know, if they have, like this one, if they're, it shows you what their status is, but if you knew that Raquel was out on leave and those points shouldn't have counted against her, then you would go and talk to your SPG and say, hey, I forgot, you know, those were actually call-offs due to FMLA and remove those points. Going back after the fact is very difficult because if we have to open up a pay period, we have to open all time cards for that pay period, make that modification, close the pay period, and rerun the points. So that's why it's important that we're looking at them, we're managing our timesheets while the pay period's open, and then we run points when it's closed. Any other questions on that? Okay. That is the main piece. If we wanna look at, so if we go to my team, I just kinda wanna show you what these tabs are, so you guys are all gonna have the same tabs like Tina was talking about. There, you know, in the past, if we pick, we'll just pick Miss Tina. Tina test or Tom test, either one. So these tabs are gonna be in the same place for everybody. You're gonna have the same information that you're gonna view. You have, the first page is employee information, which is all their account information, their personal information, the things that you can see, their emergency contact, who their manager is, what their current accruals are, date of hire, that kind of information, what their profile, and if they have any points, right? So this particular person doesn't have any points, like, if they don't have a point profile assigned to them, maybe it's a salaried person. Okay, then you could go to employee pay. This is gonna show you their base comp, show you what their, any time that they've gotten a raise, what their, change was, the date that took effect. And then it's also gonna show you the job change history. So you know how many different jobs, when they had, so this is all the information that's gonna be on my employees pay tab, okay?
The highlighted just means that's what's changed from the line before.
If there's any training, you can click on the training tab. It'll show you any kind of training or certification that this particular person has had. Any credentials or skills, which we haven't added. And then performance is where all the assessments or reviews are, okay? So you can look at what reviews have been done. Click on the magnifying glass if you wanna go into that review. Take a look at that. It's gonna be super slow. And so you can go through their performance review information as well, so if you want to look at year-over-year information. Okay? Any questions on that?
So pay will only show if you're their direct, if you're either their supervisor or manager.
Right, so if you have access to, that's a good point, if you had access to other people, so maybe if Maria had access to timesheets to be able to do any timesheet approval, but doesn't have, should not see pay, she won't see any information on the pay tab, okay?
True.
So yeah.
Cause I need to Kronos.
So anything, everybody's time, so if you're asking your SPG, hey, where's this information, they can say, oh, employee tab all the way down at the bottom. If when you have your profile moved down, if there's stuff that you used to see that you can't see anymore and you feel like, oh my gosh, I really need to see this, let us know, okay? All right, so that's everything on your team. So if you look at yourself, click on me, and you can go to my information and my profile. You're gonna see that your information is laid out the same way. So you have my info, that has all of your personal information. It has your pay. You know, what do I get paid? You know, what are my earnings? It'll show you your deductions and your earnings. So if you get a cell phone allowance, it'll show in there. If you have any deductions, it's also gonna show that information. So anything that affects your pay is listed there. And your benefits, if you're enrolled in benefits, will appear in that tab. You don't have that tab for your people because you don't have anything to do with their benefits. It doesn't really matter, you know. So we didn't give you more information than you need. Questions on that? The other piece on my, under you, is you can look at your own time, you can look at your schedule, you can look at your benefits, and then my HR will go into where you can go, if you had to do anything. So if you clicked on, HR actions, we'll go through this on the self-service. These are all the things that you're gonna be able to do for yourself, right? Change your demographics, you get married, you have a direct deposit change, an email change, emergency contact information. You will be able to enter all of your information here yourself and submit it, okay? A lot, and we'll go through this on Friday with the self-service. Again, when we talked about leave of absence, this is where you would initiate that request for leave if you wanted to take a personal leave of absence, FMLA or military, okay? So you would start that process here. That's where we kick off the workflow, give us the timelines. Any questions in that? And we're not gonna go through that too much, but for whatever questions that you have, if you go down, and we won't get into my reports, but you can go, oh, you wanna look at my pay? I didn't really, wasn't gonna go into all that, but yeah, we'll do that for self-service, but you guys can look at this, play around with this. You would be able to see your pay information, your pay statements, your W-2s, 1095s, that information will be listed in here. And then for anything beyond this, for crescent links, if you go down to the bottom, you can get to the internet, you can do accident notifications, you can look at the playbook, but if you have questions about this training, you can click on Kronos Interface Training. And these are all the YouTube videos for all the training. So how to access the saved report, how to change your direct deposit, how to add a contact, how to review timesheets. All of those training videos are listed there, okay? There will be documentation, so Tristan is adding written documentation that supports the videos, so you'll have that access, will be out on the intranet. Okay, what questions?
Does it still log you out every like 15 minutes?
Probably, no.
5 seconds.
Cool, alright.
Every 5 seconds, yeah.
Make sure mine never do reviews.
So I will I will send this to you guys on Friday, so it's just a quick tip sheet, so all the information that you need to know that we just talked about, how to get access it easily. We will also bring the brochure for the employee self-service, so how to download this onto your phone, how to navigate. This is also, we have this in 4 languages, English, Spanish, Hindi, and Nepali. So all of our major languages will be represented in this as well. So